What is going down, 49er fans? Here on Bleacher Report, we are here to break down a way too early 53-man roster. Now, you might ask yourself, is it ever too early to project the San Francisco 49ers roster? No, it's not. We are in the middle of OTAs right now. The 49ers will have practice available to the media today, so we'll be able to hear from some players down there in Santa Clara as they continue to work towards mandatory minicamp, which is the next phase in the offseason program. And then we get a nice little break, and then it's off to training camp where the real competitions will be had. And all of these basically competitions that we're going to be talking about today will get your popcorn ready. It's going to be a phenomenal one because just in going through and breaking down this 53-man roster where it's currently sitting at 90. So, I mean, that's a big trim that you're going to have to do. You look at multiple positions, it feels like nearly at every single position on this roster, there's a battle somewhere. Someone is competing at every single spot. I don't even think, in doing this first kind of round, you can see there's going to be some dicey ones here. So let's go at the top. We'll start on the offensive side of the ball. We'll start in the quarterback room, and then we'll work our way all the way down to the specialists, and we'll go from there. Shout out to Teddy in the chat. I love you too, Teddy. I hope you love some way too early 53-man roster projections because that's exactly what we're doing today. So let's get into it all right now. So starting with the quarterbacks. Honestly, I went into this roster projection. I started here. I had 3 quarterbacks. That changed once I got to the end of the roster projection because I had too many players. And so I had to decide where am I going to trim to get compliant, get down to the 53. So I had to start in the quarterback room. Now, obviously, Brock Purdy is going to be your quarterback 1 for next season. We understand this. Now, the competition starts with newcomer Josh Dobbs and Brandon Allen, who was here last year. So originally, when I jotted this down, I had 3 quarterbacks, all 3 of them here, but I had to cut someone. And so what I did is I really do love the addition of Josh Dobbs. I remember just being completely taken away by watching his performance against the 49ers on the Cardinals. And again, he was traded to 3 different teams, or he was on 3 different teams last year, traded multiple times. I think he fits in with what the 49ers are trying to accomplish and is the perfect backup for Brock Purdy. So Joshua Dobbs wins our first imaginary camp battle, and he edges out Brandon Allen. So the 49ers will actually cut Brandon Allen. This will be the first time that the 49ers only carry 2 quarterbacks, which feels like they haven't done that in the last couple of years, just because you had Trey Lance at one point with Purdy and Garoppolo on the roster. And with the situation with Purdy getting hurt in the NFC Championship game, the 49ers have had to juggle that position. But I think with Brock and Dobbs, you feel comfortable there. You cut Brandon Allen. You put Brandon Allen on the practice squad, and then you elevate him on game days as your emergency quarterback who can dress. They're your 3 quarterbacks. So we still have the 3 quarterbacks, but we have to get Brandon Allen off the 53 in order to make room for some of the rookies and the free agents that have been added. So that was my first surprise because I was like, oh, yeah, we're going in with 3. And I was like, oh, wait a second. The math ain't mathing. We're going to have to cut someone. And he, unfortunately, got the axe. But because of the reasons that I'd explained, you still put him on the practice squad and you can use him as the emergency quarterback and he can dress on game days. So we're fine there. With the running back position, and of course, Tanner Mordecai as well with the quarterbacks will go to the practice squad potentially. So I don't want to leave Tanner Mordecai out, undrafted free agent out of Wisconsin, who the 49ers also signed. But then you are looking at a running back room that currently features Christian McCaffrey, Kyle Juszczyk, Elijah Mitchell, newly signed running back Patrick Taylor Jr. from the Green Bay Packers, Isaac Guerendo, who the 49ers traded up and drafted for out of Louisville, fan favorite Jordan Mason, and undrafted free agent Cody Schrader out of Mizzou. Now, there are some backs here that I think could make this competition interesting, but ultimately when it's all said and done, I think we have a pretty solid idea of who is going to make the final 53 from the running back position. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey is a lock. Kyle Juszczyk, lock. I've seen someone already talk about Elijah Mitchell getting cut. Elijah Mitchell's only issue that I've been able to identify really as a player is his ability to stay healthy. And I don't think that's enough for him to get cut because one, I would believe that another team would pick him up like that. I don't think you can get him to the practice squad for that reason. So for that, I'm not cutting Elijah Mitchell. Elijah Mitchell will still be your RB2. Kyle Shanahan seems to have trust in Elijah. Whenever CMC was out, it was Elijah who was going in. So Elijah Mitchell will be on the roster, in my opinion, along with J.P. Mason. Now, obviously, I'm going to pull Juice out of this mix. He's a fullback. So right now we have 3 running backs. There's got to be someone else, right, who fills that hole. And then you got the competition between rookie Isaac Guerendo, Patrick Taylor, and undrafted free agent Cody Schrader. I think you look at the capital that was given to select Isaac Guerendo. You look at his speed. He reminds me of like a mini Mostert in a sense. So I think Isaac Guerendo makes the roster. I think it only makes sense. So you have 5 in the running back, fullback room. So that's CMC, Juice, Mitchell, Mason, and Guerendo. Cody Schrader, though, will be on the practice squad, and Cody Schrader will make an impact for the San Francisco 49ers in 2024. I don't know how, I don't know when, but my gut is telling me do not sleep on UDFA Cody Schrader. This dude, all he did in the SEC was produce. He was the leading rusher in the SEC last year. I don't think there's a roster spot for him right now, but you put him on the practice squad and he gets on the field through potential special teams. And then we know if Elijah Mitchell goes down, he could find his way onto that roster pretty quickly. So a guy like Cody Schrader, Patrick Taylor, we're going to bump them onto the practice squad. So nothing too crazy yet. Nothing too crazy yet. We get to the wide receiver room for the San Francisco 49ers. And there's a bunch of different ways you could go. But let's get the big 3 out of the way. Ayuk, Debo, Jennings, as it currently stand, appear to be roster locks. Obviously, 2 of those 3 are in the middle of contract negotiations. It appears Ayuk is well documented. Juwan Jennings hasn't signed his exclusive rights tender yet, so there's still some work to be done there. But I think if we take a step back, we all expect them at this stage in the game to be available for the regular season. So Ayuk, Debo, Jennings, we're going to make those guys locks. And then we have to decide between Ronnie Bell, first-round draft pick, Ricky Pearsall, fourth-round draft pick, Jacob Cowing, former third-round draft pick, Danny Gray, who was essentially medically redshirted last year. He did not play or was pulled off IR for the entire season, so he did not take a single snap for the San Francisco 49ers after getting injured in a preseason game against Denver. But then you have Chris Conley, the veteran, who made some plays down the stretch, especially in big-time moments in the playoffs. Then you've got Trent Taylor, who the 49ers have brought in, most likely to be the punt returner. And then, of course, you have Tabe Martin, who's heading into year 3 as a former undrafted free agent. And then 49ers legend Terrell Owens' son, Tariq Owens, is also currently on the roster. So that's where the competition to me really starts, is at wide receiver 4. But based on what Ronnie Bell did last year, how he fit into this room, we saw him as a blocker. And again, he was used very sparingly. He had the touchdown against the New York Giants. I believe that was week 3. I got Ronnie Bell making the roster. Obviously, we're going to take the first round rookie pick, Ricky Pearsall. He's on the roster. And Jacob Cowing is also on the roster. These 2 rookies could have a big year if given the opportunity to see the field. So that has us at 6. That has us at 6. But I decided that I wanted 7 wide receivers this time around. So last year, the San Francisco 49ers only kept 6. They kept Debo, Ayuk, Jennings, Bell, McLeod, and Gray. But I'm keeping 7. And my 7th out of Danny Gray, Chris Conley, Trent Taylor, Tay Martin, and Tariq Owens, I'm keeping Danny Gray. And you might be like, what? Why would you keep Danny Gray? Danny Gray couldn't even get on the field last year. You're keeping Danny Gray? If there's one thing about the NFL that we know, you can't teach speed, and Danny Gray has got a lot of it. I'm not giving up on Danny Gray just yet. I want to give him one more camp to see how he can rebound after an extremely disappointing season last year. And he really hasn't been able to do much of anything since coming into the NFL from SMU. So this is definitely a make or break for Danny Gray. And the reason, and I can see you in the comments, and you guys, this was who the battle was between. It was between Danny Gray and it was between Chris Conley. And this is the rationale between bumping Gray over Conley. I believe the 49ers can get Chris Conley to the practice squad. I believe someone might take a chance on Danny Gray. Someone might take a chance on trying to swoop him. Get that speed, see if they get him into a different system. And he's younger. So I think there's still upside with Danny Gray's game, some unrealized potential that some team could potentially swoop him up. I do believe we can get Chris Conley back to the practice squad, and you can elevate him on game days for special teams and moments where you need to get him in the game. So that's the rationale. Is one, Danny, big time training camp for him. But I also believe you can get Chris Conley to the practice squad, along with Trent Taylor, Tay Martin, and Tariq Owens. I think when you're looking at it from that perspective, those 4 guys have the best chance of sticking around versus I think Danny Gray, someone could take him and just swoop him, see how he does. Because again, you can't teach speed, and he has a lot of it. So I totally understand the rationale with Conley, but again, I believe you can get Conley back to the practice squad. So let's go to the tight end room. Now, this is where I also had an original number as I was building this out, and I had to go back and cut from the tight end room. We know George Kittle is tight end 1, and it's not up for debate. And a lot of the talk that I've been having on my channels about the 49ers letting Ross Dwelley go, letting Charlie Warner sign, both of them signed with the Falcons. So typically under the Kyle Shanahan regime, we have seen Kyle invest into the tight end room. Last year we had 4 tight ends on the final 53. They have they have always had a stockpile of tight ends. But when we head into this training camp, we have George Kittle, Braden Willis, Cameron Latu, Eric Saubert, Jake Tonges, and Mason Pline. So it doesn't feel like the same robust tight end room that we're used to. So that has me thinking, could we be going to a little bit more of a passing friendly offense? That again is why I also kept 7 wide receivers opposed to 6, and why I'm only keeping 3 tight ends, because I do believe we could see a bit of an evolution of the offense, and it could look like in the form of putting the ball in Brock Purdy's hands more and trying to get it to his receivers, whether in space. We understand that Brock Purdy is an elite processor, so he can get the ball where it's supposed to be. And I think Kyle has that trust in him. So we could see the passing game open up, and that might allow the 49ers to kind of adjust some numbers. So that's where I got some numbers being adjusted. So I actually had George Kittle, Braden Willis, Cameron Latu, and Eric Saubert as the guys who are making it. I had to go back and I had to cut Latu. Now, so this is where, and this is based on last year, because Cameron Latu, as someone who covered training camp, had a really rough training camp. However, I do believe Latu has a huge opportunity to take a massive rebound from what he did last year. But that's where the competition starts. It's Saubert versus Latu, the veteran versus the second-year player. And we got to see who's going to step up. But based on where we're currently at, I want Saubert. And so Latu is going to have a big, big training camp this year. So we're going to have to see what he shows up and does. But that's 3 tight ends that I have the 49ers keeping. And then also when we look at the offensive line, this was a very challenging one because the 49ers have a ton of offensive linemen. We know who all the starters are: Trent Williams, Aaron Bakes, Jake Brendel, Jonathan Feliciano, and Colton McKivitz. Those guys are all locks. I think Jalen Moore is a lock because he's your primary swing tackle. But as we saw last year, the 49ers only like him at left tackle. They don't like him at right tackle. So that is going to trigger them to keep Chris Hubbard, who they signed just a couple weeks ago, who has a lot of starting experience under his belt, to be the right swing tackle behind Colton McKivitz. So then effectively, if you're keeping 9 offensive linemen, you have Dominic Pooney, Nick Zakel, Sebastian Gutierrez, Ben Barch, Jarrett Kingston, Brandon Parker, Drake Nugent, Bryson Mays, and Isaac Alcone, I believe. You basically have 9 guys competing for 2 spots after that. So the offensive line competition is going to be fascinating, because I think a guy like Ben Barch could make it. I think a guy like Jarrett Kingston, the 6th-round draft pick out of USC, could make it. I think Drake Nugent could surprise and potentially make it as well. So there's a lot of guys vying for these last 2 offensive line spots. But obviously you're going to pencil in Dominic Pooney, who was a 3rd-round draft pick, and Burford. So you can only keep 9. I honestly, this is going to be one of the crazier camp battles to see who's going to be able to lock down an offensive line spot. And that's what I got. I got Burford, Pooney, Moore, and Hubbard as your reserve offensive linemen, making that 9 total. So as we got through the offense, that's 26 on offense. So any reservations about the way we've built out our offense? Again, the numbers, it's a little crazy, especially this early, and we haven't been to training camp yet and see who's taken strides and steps forward and who's fallen. So again, we're trying to project out as best we can. But that leads us to the defensive side of the football, where we've seen a lot of change, especially on the defensive line. So there's going to be some new starters and there's going to be some new faces. We obviously know Nick Bosa is a lock. We know Javon Hargrave is a lock. Leonard Floyd, lock. And I would have to say Malik Collins, I wouldn't say he's as much of a lock because what did it take? I think it was a 7th-round draft pick. So it's not like the 49ers invested a ton of capital into him in order to acquire him. From the Texans, so there is a possibility that, let's say he doesn't look the part, the 49ers could go elsewhere, but I do imagine Malik Collins will make the roster. So your starting defensive line is Bosa, Collins, Hargrave, Floyd. And then beyond that, I have the 49ers keeping 9 defensive linemen on this roster. That is one up from last year. Last year, they had 8 defensive linemen. Because of the changes, I went 9. And even so, by adding 1 additional defensive lineman, you're still cutting some good defensive linemen. So behind the starters, I have the 49ers keeping Robert Beal, who apparently has added about 15 pounds in muscle and is looking pretty good. So the former 5th-round rookie last year out of Georgia has the opportunity to take some strides forward at defensive end. But you also have Jordan Elliott, who the 49ers signed as an interior defensive tackle. He makes it. Kevin Givens makes it, who re-signed on a 1-year deal. Probably the player that I am most excited about from the offseason additions is Yetur Gross-Matos. I'm very excited about him because I think he can be Charles Omenihu 2.0. That Arden Key Omenihu role that Chris Kosurik has really been able to find this use for this kind of hybrid edge player. Yetur Gross-Matos fits that perfectly. So Yetur is a guy, YGM as I like to call him, is a guy that I'm super hyped for. I think he could be a huge asset. And then Drake Jackson rounding out the 9 defensive tackle. And it was hard because that means I'm cutting Kalia Davis. I'm cutting T.Y. McGill, amongst others. Evan Anderson, promising, DJ Jones type defensive tackle, undrafted free agent. He would be on the practice. So pretty much everyone else goes to the practice squad. But a big position that is going to have a lot of eyes on it is going to be the linebacker room. With Dre Greenlaw most likely starting the season on the PUP, they did make a change to the IR rules, so we could actually see Greenlaw on IR. Again, typically, if you get put on IR before the season starts, you can't come off of it. But the NFL made an adjustment to the rules that if you are placed on IR during training camp, you can still come off IR in the regular season. So, again, that's what happened to Latu last year. He got put on IR during training camp, couldn't return. And so with Greenlaw, it's either PUP or IR, which means he isn't taking up a roster spot. That's the point. But beyond that, I have the 49ers keeping 6 linebackers. Warner, obviously, Devondre Campbell, who was signed in free agency, who's seemingly feeling rejuvenated from some of his social media posts. You have the 2 young, promising, up-and-coming linebackers, D. Winters and Jalen Graham. I think those guys might have a shot at mixing in quite a bit with Devondre Campbell, especially if they take a big year 1 to year 2 leap. They have an opportunity. I also have DFF, Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles, who is a key special teamer, loved in the locker room. Everyone loves DFF. And then I have Zeke Turner, signed in free agency, actually edging out Tatum Bethune, who the 49ers drafted in the 7th round. Now, this could be swapped in the real roster. This will be something that we look at in training camp. But I think it's Ezekiel Turner, who was an all-pro special teamer, according to the Pro Football Writers of America. I think it was either his rookie year or his second year. I can't recall with the Arizona Cardinals, but he's been proven to be a key special teamer. So it's who can provide the most value on special teams between the rookie Tatum Bethune and Ezekiel Turner, who's been able to prove he can get it done from a special team standpoint in the NFL, converted safety to linebacker. But I have Turner beating him, and then I have Tatum Bethune on the practice squad. That could be flipped when we get through training camp, but that's one of the big battles that I'll be watching for as well. And so that's 6 linebackers that I have making it with Greenlaw on PUP and or IR, depending on whatever the 49ers decide. And then when we get to the cornerback room, again, this is where it gets challenging. There's so many cornerbacks that could potentially make this roster, but I had to cut it to 5. I was like, man, making these rosters is like, can we have a 60-man roster? Because, man, there's some good players who have to get cut. But obviously, we know Ward and Lenore are locks. The 49ers signed Isaac Yiadom from the Saints. Right now, I have him as a lock. I think he's going to make it. He has showed some promising ability when he was with the Saints as a starter. So I'm going to keep Yiadom around. Obviously, when we get to training camp, will be much easier to see for our own eyes. But also, the 49ers drafted a second-round cornerback for the first time that early in 2 decades in Renardo Green. This was a guy where I came on Bleacher Report, and I pointed him out as a sleeper that the 49ers must target in this draft. During the pre-draft process, when we were doing our pre-draft streams, guess what? San Francisco 49ers, they were listening to our Bleacher Report stream here, and they said, you know what? This Renardo Green kid, Brad knows what he's talking about. Let's go get him in the second round. He has the opportunity to be a starter as a rookie, so it's going to be fascinating to see. But for that last spot, you have Darrell Luter Jr., 5th-round draft pick from last year, Ambry Thomas, former 3rd-round draft pick, Samuel Womack, former 5th-round draft pick, Chase Lucas, and Keemon Hall, all fighting for that last spot. I think it's going to be Darrell Luter Jr. I think the Ambry Thomas, tenure comes to an end. Rock Ya-Sin was also signed, but I think Yiadom is the better of the veterans, so he makes it. Samuel Womack, I would love to have on the practice squad, but again, just from the numbers and how he's been used recently, I don't have him making the final 53, but that will be a battle that we look out for. And then guys like Chase Lucas, Keemon Hall, set for the practice squad. So 5 cornerbacks. And then we get to our final room, which is the safety room. Jair Brown, Talanoa Hufanga, Malik Mustafa, George Odom. Pretty simple. They have guys like Taylor Hawkins, Eric Harris, Jalen Mahoney, undrafted free agent out of Vandy. I really like. That's a guy that I'm really excited to look at training camp, but I'm also really excited about Malik Mustafa. It's just nothing but good things we've heard about Malik Mustafa so far out of OTAs. He's a great interview, and he looked great in college. So that is going to be my safety room that has us at 4. And then, of course, we round out the specialists with Tabor Pepper, Mitch Wishnowsky, and Jake Moody. So we have a total of 26 offensive players, 24 defensive players, and the 3 specialists to get us to the 53-man roster. Let me just run it down really quick. We got Brock Purdy, Josh Dobbs, CMC, Juice, Eli Mitchell, JP Mason, Isaac Guerrero, Ayuk, Debo, Jennings, Bell, Purcell, Cowing, Gray, Kittle, Willis, Salbert, Trent Williams, Aaron Banks, Brendel, Feliciano, McKivitz, Burford, Pooney, Moore, Hubbard, Bosa, Collins, Hargrave, Floyd, Beal, Jordan Elliott, Givens, YGM, also known as Edra Gross Matos, Drake Jackson. We also have Warner, Campbell, Winters, Graham, DFF, and Ezekiel Turner with Greenlaw on IR PUP, Ward, Lenore, Yadam, Green Looter, Brown, Hufanga, Mustafa, Odom, and your 3 specialists. So that is your way too early 53-man roster projection. Like I said, we have some immediate availability for these players today as they continue to get through OTAs. This, I believe, is the last week of OTAs, and then they will transition into mandatory minicamp next week and then break until training camp, where we will really find out who is going to make the final 53. Shout out to everyone for tapping in on the stream here on Bleacher Report. My name's Brad. You can find me anywhere at TheSFNiners on any social platform that you use. Find me on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, all of it. So shout out to everyone who tapped in and appreciate all of you guys. I will see you guys again later. And shout out Bleacher Report. Let's go.